Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Invest with Dave. So, in this episode, I want to talk about a very specific financial asset called SPY-U. So, SPY-U is a Forex leveraged financial asset which the Bank of Montreal manages. There are other ones like 2x or 3x leverage, but the basic idea is that SPY-U bets four times as much on whatever movement S&P 500 does. So if S&P 500 goes up by 1%, then SPY-U will go up 4% in that same day. Then if you want to put your money somewhere and you want it to grow with the S&P, but you think, well, I know that S&P goes up 7 to 10% on a average per year, then maybe you might want to consider putting it on SPY-U if that's the kind of risk that you're willing to take. Now, SPY-U is a 4x leveraged financial asset, which means that if S&P goes down 5% in a day, you lose 20% in just one day. So this is something that's not to be held as, oh, I'm going to get rich super quick or anything like that. But it is an interesting idea because there are a lot of people who say most hedge funds don't outperform the S&P 500. I don't know the specifics around that, but I think you can look it up. Something about hedge funds can't beat S&P 500. Yeah, so there are a lot of hedge funds that have historically underperformed it, especially after factoring in their typically higher fees. So then that started a lot of people thinking, hey, why don't I just not give my money to a hedge fund and just put it on the S&P 500? Well, this could be kind of like an evolution of that idea where you say, hey, if I'm not going to touch this money for a really long time, why don't I just put it on SPY-U? Because my money will grow just like the S&P 500, but it'll grow four times as much. So over the same period of time, let's say you hope that the market goes up 7 to 10% annually on average. Well, over the next 10 years, if that's true, then you're talking about potentially 28 to 40% return potentially over 10 years. And that's just basically constantly putting your money onto this one financial asset. Now, there are a lot of problems with this. Number one, don't put all your money in one basket. That's a bad idea. Number two, this is Forex leverage, which means, again, I can't say this enough times. If it goes down, it's going to go down a lot. And if you need that money for rent or food or whatever, you're not getting it. If you do want to hold it for the long term, you might not get your money back because the Bank of Montreal is the person or the organization who manages all of this. And if they go broke or if they can't pay you back, you might be out of luck. It's not like the S&P 500 where you own a whole basket of stocks. It's a lot more complicated than that. You have this group that manages all of these financial assets and then has to get a whole bunch of leverage credit in order to do more risky bets so that their returns can be higher. And added to the fact that you don't get 4%. You will never get not 4%. You won't get 4x on your money back because they take a certain small percentage. Well, whether it's small or not depends on who you ask. I think for any regular day trader, it might look like a regular risk that they might want to take because I think that it's something that is just fair considering they have to manage all of the financial finagling in order to get that 4x bet. But at the same time, you have a lot of these hedge funds who will say, oh, this is like a really expensive, really high fee just for them to do all this management and stuff like that. Maybe. But at the same time, if you really treat it like S&P 500 and you're just, dollar cost averaging, just putting in money on a regular interval and you don't look at it over years and years and years, theoretically, assuming that the underlying group who's issuing this remains solvent. In other words, they don't go bankrupt, they don't do anything crazy or unethical. They actually do what they say they're doing and they maintain reasonable costs. Then it would seem like this is a way better strategy than the S&P 500 dollar cost averaging strategy alone. So again, there are a couple of risks here, like liquidity, whether you trust Bank of Montreal to actually do what they say they'll do, whether something bad might happen on their side with inability to actually make those investments and actually get the 3 to 4x return that people are expecting them to make. But generally, big funds who make money by managing other people's money will not recommend this to people because they just want you to feel like they're really, really smart and they've got some complicated strategies that you can never come up with. So a lot of times what you'll hear is negative news from these people who have no incentive to promote these kinds of assets. Now, you have to be careful because with any kind of investment, there's definitely going to be a lot of risk. But frankly, I think SPY-U might just be a new evolution of the S&P 500 on a longer term scale. And then the question becomes, well, what's stopping people from betting 10x or 100x or whatever? Well, you can potentially do something like that, but then you start getting into the idea of options, and there are type of option strategies where basically you keep betting that the S&P goes up, but of course you lose a lot of money when it doesn't do that. So with something like SPY-U, where you buy it and hold it, I guess one of the risk mitigations is that you don't lose absolutely everything. If the markets go down, yes, you lose a lot more than other people do. But if for some crazy reason you decide to sell when it's actually down, even though historically S&P 500 goes up, then at least you can recoup some of the money that you still have on that asset. Whereas if you play around with options and stuff like that, there is the possibility you literally lose 100% of your money. That's not saying that S&P 500 can't go to zero tomorrow. I mean, obviously, I think if World War III happened and then everybody got blown up, I'm sure the market would go super, super high with defense stocks, and then it would crash when everyone realizes money is meaningless. But we're not talking about those kinds of situations or levels of risk at this point. We're just trying to talk about what are things that are more likely and things that we should probably take into account. All right, so that's it for this particular episode. I just wanted to quickly talk about this because I think SPY-U and similar kinds of leverage ETFs or leverage assets are really interesting to explore. I think that these are underutilized by a lot of individuals, and I think that there are so many people who are trying to sell you a course or sell you some really fancy, complicated strategy when things that are simple as this could actually be a little bit safer while offering potentially more steady growth. I'm not saying it's absolutely safer, but historically, there seems to be a decent amount of evidence to suggest that. All right. Well, thanks for listening in, and I hope you follow.